Hey guys, thanks for joining us here at Salty Ginger Talk. If you're a returning listener, it's great to have you back. If you're new to the channel, really glad you joined us. Hope you like what you hear. So, we have reached out and looked for guests who can share life experiences, who can share what they've learned in their decades of experience, both in the world, in the professional world, in relationships. And we keep finding such high caliber people. Today's guest is no exception. His name is Glenn Poulos. He is originally from Canada, lives in Florida now, and he is kind of a serial entrepreneur. And he's going to tell us about the highs and lows of entrepreneurship across his career. And he's got a couple of businesses that he has sold. One of them he sold, and then things turned to shit right after he sold it. One of them he sold, and it's gone well. And he's actually working on a couple new ventures now. Super interesting guy. He's written a book, a great book on sales and tips on how to sell. And highly recommend you check that out as well. So, without further ado, let's bring Glenn onto the channel now. So, Glenn, welcome to Salty Ginger Talk. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Joe. Great to be here.
Yeah, we had a great conversation a little over a month. I guess it was over a month ago now. I know you've been
Yeah.
had some stuff going on. You've been busy, but I'm glad we were able to find some time in our schedules to make this work. Your background is super interesting. I think our listeners can learn a lot from it, and you bring so much experience to the table. And I'm really excited to share that, for have you share that with our listeners. So, if you wouldn't mind,
Well, thank
start off
you.
with just a little
Yeah,
bit about yourself, and then we'll work through your super interesting history because you've had to
sure.
reinvent yourself and rebuild yourself a couple of times.
Yeah, a few times. Yeah. So started out as a failed government worker, failed civil servant, got kicked out of the government at in my early 20s. Told me I was working too hard and get out. It's like a reverse Doge. And yeah. Yeah,
Oh, I love it.
my boss in the government told me I should go get a job in sales. And so that's exactly what I did. I went and got a job in sales. And that was in 1985. And worked for a sales company for 5.5 years. I'll give it to you quickly and then we can zoom back in and out, right? So,
Yeah,
and
for sure.
worked for them for like 5 years. I approached them with a business idea to spin off a division of their business, and so I could, meet my goal of wanting to become an entrepreneur by the age of 30. And they said no, and so I ended up quitting that job, and I went out and did it without them. Went on to run that business for 15 years, sold it, and that was in the early 2000s. And then I got an opportunity to start another business in 2007, which similar business, which I was also able to run for another 15 years. It brought me up to 2022, sold that to private equity. I worked with them for 3 years, plus or minus a couple months, and left them in December of last year. And I'm working now on my third iteration. Different country now. I moved to a different country, different technology, but the same kind of business, and see if I could do it for a third time. And there were a lot of up and downs during those businesses that I'm happy to dive in on. It wasn't all smooth sailing, but nonetheless, the lots of experience and opportunities along the way. And I got a chance during COVID to write my book on sales, Never Sit in the Lobby, which came out right around the same time I sold the business. And so I've been, touring around on podcasts and stuff, sort of promoting the book and the message behind that. So, which is really how to grow a business, how to get, act, and stay in front of your customers, and to be a pleasure to do business with always. So, 57 tips.
Love it. That is great stuff. I'm super excited to dive into all that. And we touched on some of it briefly. I mean, we only talked for a half hour when we talked previously, but enough to get the broad strokes. I know there's a ton of value in there and really excited about it. So it's funny you bring up the government worker part because literally the
Yeah.
podcast we produced and aired today is on why socialism always fails and capitalism is a better economic system under which to
Nice.
operate countries. And that's one of the reasons, as we talked about the bureaucracy, that always, and I rarely make global statements, but I'll make that one, socialism and capitalism always leads to bureaucracies that wind up kind of folding over on themselves because they get too big and too slow and blah, blah, blah. So I bet you actually did get let go because you were too productive. That's a true story, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, indeed. No, the workers were getting mad because I was doing piecework in the electronics lab, and I was doing too many pieces too quickly, and a couple of the guys were getting angry with me, and but also I guess just the guy who was my boss was a really smart guy, ex-military. He was a real mentor to me, and he just thought I was in the wrong game, and pointed me in a different direction, which ended up really changing the course of how my kind of thing played out. So,
I love that. I just a brief anecdote. I learned that same lesson when I was 15 years old. I worked for the maintenance department of the school district that I went to when I was 15. They had summer work, and I was one of the summer workers that they hired. And so they had an electrician teach me how to wire lights and outlets and things like that because they were upgrading to energy efficient. This was back in the 80s. You remember the big push to do everything energy efficient in the 80s. And energy efficient lights and energy efficient windows and all that jazz. And the guy I was working with was actually the security guard at the high school I went to. That was his full time gig, but he had summers off. So he worked in the maintenance department during the summer to make some extra money. And so he comes into
wow.
this room, and I'm working on a lift about 20 feet in the air, and I'm wiring these lights, and I get one done, and I move to the next one. And he comes in, he's like, "Well, you're almost done with this classroom." And I said, "Yeah, I'll be done in a couple minutes." And he goes, "You got to slow it down." I'm like, "What?" He said, he said, "We
Yeah,
got to make this
yeah,
last all day." And I said,
yeah,
"Hey, man, fuck you. I don't know how it works in your house,
yeah,
but I do my
exactly.
job. That's how it works. My dad
Right.
would beat my ass if I sloughed off when someone was paying me. So I got introduced to that very early
Yeah.
on. So,
Same. Yeah,
so
that's
you've,
pretty
you,
much how it went for me too.
that's why I knew it was a true story. I've had it happen. Um,
Yeah.
but sales, have you always had an affinity for sales, or is that something, did you have an affinity and then got better at it? Or how did sales work for you to begin with?
I never had given it any thought until I had gotten the first job in sales. It never really crossed my mind. I did work in a jewelry store, and there was a high degree of customer service and sort of selling involved, but I wasn't actually in the sales. I was actually in the small jewelry and watch repair department, and but I dealt with hundreds and hundreds of customers and really enjoyed that. And I grew up in a motel. My parents owned a motel. And
No, really?
so yeah, so I've been serving customers since I was like 9 years old, and but I got that first job in sales, and for a while, for the first few months, I was kind of a little fish out of watery. And oh, sorry about I got a couple of dogs. Can we do a time and you can edit this out? I gotta let them out, or they're gonna bark.
No,
And
go ahead. Take care. We can edit it out. Go take care of your dogs. I'll be right
okay,
here.
I'll be right
Yep.
back. Yeah,
Sure. No
okay,
worries.
one second.
See how critical your role is, James?
Yes, I know, Joe. Let me pause first.
In the way of recording, but sorry about
And then,
that.
well, they probably saw our logo and were excited. They thought they could be on as well.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Sorry about that.
No worries. So let's just, if you
Uh,
could start your answer again about working at the jewelry shop and then transitioning into sales at the new company, just pick it up there and that'll give James a nice clean point
yeah.
to edit from.
Yeah, so I was working in a jewelry store and learned the ins and outs of customer service, and then I joined the sales company, and I felt a little like was saying a fish out of watery, but trying to learn the products, and later, we may get a chance to talk about that chapter in the book, but on how I learned to learn about products in a sales company, but I got after about 3 months of product knowledge and stuff like that, the owners he looked around our global territory that we had, right? And he said, where's the one place I can send him that if he screws it up, we don't care, right? And so now, of course, at the time I lived in Ontario, and so he sent me from the Toronto area. He sent me out to Windsor, which was like
No,
it's on the Detroit Windsor border, right? And I mean, it's
yeah.
like a town of a couple tens of thousands or whatever, right? But I mean, and he thought, oh, like like whatever, he'll go do some damage there or whatever, and we don't have to go back and say we're sorry, right? And so the funny thing was that I just actually love this story because I came back with like an order for like $16,000, I think it was, for this electronic instrument that we sold, and it was such a great application at Ford. The owner, his mind was blown, right? That I was able to flush out this application, which we were able to use the product for. It was a little off kilter, right? And got this deal on my first trip, into no man's land, but also visited the University of Windsor and spoke to a professor there who clued me in on this funding that was coming along for semiconductor research, right? And it turned out that I came back and I said, "Oh, you got to sign up a vendor for this semiconductor stuff." And the guy's like, "Dude, you were just like on your first sales call, take a chill pill." But fast forward a couple of months and he realized that I was actually right, and he
Mm.
did sign it, and they ended up doing millions of dollars in business. I didn't get any of it because they hired a guy much more seasoned than me to sell the product. But they had, and it was this Canadian government was funding these semiconductor tools for universities, right? And so they cut a swath across Canada selling these things. And I found all this out on my first trip, my first sales trip, right? Now they all didn't go that well, but yeah, that was in 1985, right? And then all of a sudden, it sort of just clicked what selling was about, and that's where I started. And then I started listening and looking at what the guys in the company were doing, and writing down the rules. And those rules later were what became the 57 tips in the book, right? And I also learned, working for those guys, excuse me, working for those guys, that you can make really good money, for comparatively little education, right? It's the one sort of field where you don't need to have, like, a brain surgeon makes tons of money, but he also has 15 years of schools, right? And a sales guy can, he might have a little bit of post-secondary or what have you, but you can really sort of leap over the standard executive, who rises up the ranks through the years, and you basically get paid for your value in what you can bring in, right? And I've always felt that a job in sales was kind of like a cheat code for raising your standard of living, right? And so that's why I've always encouraged people to look and see if they were capable of taking their interests and what they were good at, and then finding companies that sell into that field and go into the sales department of those companies, right? And so that was where it all started. But then I realized, like, the owners were making a lot more than I was. I was only leveraging my own self, right? I was making good money, and then I thought, but hey, every time I sell, he gets paid too, right? So I said, wouldn't it be better if I owned the company? And so it took me a few years for that to settle in. But like I said, I approached them to spin off this tiny little bit of their business. They were in the general purpose electronic business, and I approached them and said, "Look, I'd like to take this little area, this technology, and focus on it. Need one of your vendors. I'm going to go sign up a bunch of other vendors. You can own a bit of the business. I'll own some of it." They said flat out no, and of course that business was the burgeoning cell phone business in 1991, right? And of course it never went anywhere, right? Like, I mean, who needs a cell phone, right? And uh and so I ended up picking a good market to go into, was broadband mobile wireless. And I ended up riding the wave of 1G, 2G, 3G, up through 5G, and through two companies, but helping carriers build wireless networks, and focusing on that part of the technology space, right? And
That is awesome. I love I did a podcast episode several months back on exactly what you just said, that if you want outsized compensation in relation to your commitment or skill level, find a job in sales and get good at it,
yeah,
because companies always need things sold, and a lot of people are not, either they're not good at it, it makes them uncomfortable, or they just don't know how to close. They don't know how to develop
yeah,
relationships with people. And like, people buy from people they know and trust. It comes down to that. And
yeah,
I'm sure we'll talk about that when we get to your book. But yeah, I love that. I also love just so one thing we do on our podcast, Glenn, is we recap and or point out common themes we see from all of our guests. And we
Right.
have such a wide range of guests. We attract a really high caliber person like yourself, and we see similar themes over and over and over again. And one of them is they take their chances, they take their shots, they take action. And so Glenn's demonstrated that multiple times already, and we're still pretty early in his career. So he's worked for the government. He got canned because he did too good of a job, was too productive. And you guys might think he's lying about that, but I know he's telling the truth 100%.
Yeah.
And goes to winds up at this company, and they give him a shitty territory. So he makes things happen in the shitty territory. Then he comes up with an idea to that winds up being a huge industry down the road. And instead of saying, "Oh, they told me no, I guess I'll shut up and go back on the road and sell my stuff," he takes his shots there, right? So again, we talk about it on the podcast a lot. You've got to take action if you want to build a life that you want. You can't sit and wait. No one's going to wander into your living room and give you opportunities. You got to go out and find them. You got to take action when you get them. So you are talking or listening to and hearing from someone who did exactly that. And, I know some of Glenn's story already. So it sounds like, hey, great. He's on a rocket ship pointed towards the sun. Well, maybe, but like there's a lot of shitty stuff coming too. So it's not it's
Yeah. Oh
it's
yeah.
not linear. Glenn's got some experience
Oh
under
yeah.
his belt. Experience is something you
Yeah.
get right after you
Yeah.
need it. And so we'll talk about that too. But so you go out and you start this business helping cellular companies build wireless networks. Did you know
Right.
a lot about that at that point?
I knew I sort of knew about it more at kind of like the gizmo level, like the amplifiers and the radios and the testing of therein. The network side of it was a little bit new to me, and so I would just started selling them components in the beginning, but then I was able to expand my horizons and look at it bigger from a more network perspective. Although I was selling products into their network, I wasn't really thinking about the CDMA network or the GSM network or whatever. But I realized that getting higher up the food chain of the network itself, but on the radio side of it, was really a huge business, right? And I was selling. Yeah, I started by selling widgets that they would buy once in a while, but when you can sell into the network, they buy it over and over and over and over and over
Mm.
again. It's like printing money, right? And so it takes you a long time to get a product into the network, but once you do, you're locked. You're locked and loaded. They just keep buying and buying and buying, right? And so the business ended up having two sides to it, sort of the the day-to-day stuff, the bubblegum stuff we would sell ad hoc here and there, and then the network elements, right? And ultimately over time we ended up forming two different sales forces because the sales cycles were so radically different,
Mm.
and the skill sets were different as well. So
Sure. So you build that company up. Would you say that took 15 years?
yep, 15 years, sold it after 15 years, and it was in the I can't remember exactly, but I think it was the top line was around close to $40 million top line revenue at the time, sold the business. And we ended up being acquired by a public company, which there's a good story there to tell, and
Let's hear it.
how that played out.
Yeah,
So
this is interesting. I want to hear this. This is where I was
yeah,
hoping you could spend some time and
so
educate our listeners.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, and of course now I laugh about it, right? So, anyways, so this public company came along. And in Canada, this company was a household name. Okay, like everybody knew the company. They bought cell phones from this company, and I mean, we didn't sell cell phones. We sold the network stuff, right? But a cell phone sales company that was a household name, that was a public company, came along and wanted to buy the business, right? And it was me and two partners, right? And they ended up buying the business, and they ended up giving us a whack of shares, so we all became multimillionaires overnight. Like, it was between 5 and 10 million each that we got, right? And so I was like a multimillionaire, right? And I had already been making good money, but not that kind of money, right? I was
Sure.
making good, annual income that the business was throwing off, and it was always a good living. And it was a great job, right? But I owned the business. But anyway, now I sold it and I got, say, $5 million in shares, and I got a very little amount of cash. And it was under 100K of cash up front and $5 odd million worth of shares. And I had a little bit more ownership than anyone. So I became the largest shareholder now in this public company, as a matter of fact, as well. And to make a long story short, because I don't want to just blather on about it, what ended up happening was that I didn't realize that, despite the fanfare of this business, they had also bought all sorts of other companies over time with shares and things like that that had kind of tanked. And so they had all of this stuff weighing them down. And my business was throwing off massive amounts of cash every month, right? It was a I can't remember the day when they bought us exactly how much it was, the annual turnover, but in the end it was around 40 million. But it was throwing off a lot of cash, and that's what they desperately needed, was this cash. And so I remember the day we signed the papers. This was even before DocuSign, right? I mean, we had to go to a bank and they had this stack of papers, that was like, a foot high that we had to
Oh yeah.
sign. I was at the Bank of Nova Scotia in Toronto, and so we had driven there. We'd signed all these papers, like taken whatever 2 hours to sign all this stuff, right? And the bank was about like 20 to 30 minutes from the office, right? And so I get in my car and I'm driving back to the office, right? After having sold my business, I got my 5 million bucks, whatever. I'm happy, and right. And the bank manager calls me on the way back to the office, right? And he's like, "What the right? What they, and I don't know if I can swear, right? But he's
Oh
like,
yeah. Let it fly, buddy. Let it fly.
what the fuck, right? Like, and I'm like, what? And so our line of credit was something we used to fund receivables, payables, stuff like that, right?
Sure.
And it was at zero when we sold the business, right? It
Yeah. You
was,
tap it, you pay it down. You tap it, you pay it down.
right,
It's just
tap, pay
there.
it down, and it was at zero. And we
Yeah.
had, I can't remember, I don't want to make it up, but we had a fair bit of money in the bank, in the hundreds of K, right? And so he's like, your your $2 million line of credit was at zero this morning. It's now at 2 million. And the 750 grand or whatever it was is gone. Like, what is going on? Right. And I'm like, what have I done? Right. And that was the first telltale sign. And they sucked like almost 3 million bucks out of the business before I even got back to work.
This is literally right after you signed the deal.
Yeah. Yeah. And all I have at this point is 100K and $5 million worth of shares, right? Which I can't sell, which I can't sell because I'm an insider. I'm a gross insider because I'm the largest shareholder in the company. I can only sell 1% every 90 days for the first 2 years or something like that, right? So I
Mm.
can't even sell anything for 90 days, right? I know I'm blathering on. So to make a
No, no,
long
this is
story
great stuff.
shorter, to make a long story shorter, that company went bankrupt and the shares went to zero. And I ended up giving away my business of 15 years for nothing. I got nothing. I had nothing. I had nothing left. Like, I got fired. The company went bankrupt. We all lost our jobs, 100 people. And the shares went to zero. So I had to get a job. And so because I didn't know how to get a job, I started another company and doing the exact same thing. Basically, I just went across the street, called some customers. Some of them were really pissed off because of the business going into receivership or whatever, caused
Yeah.
a supply chain shock to our big customers. These like TELUS, Bell, Rogers in Canada, right? Big companies. They're mad. And did my begging, and TELUS ended up becoming the most sympathetic and was able to uh, you cobble together a few new vendors and a few of the old vendors. The old vendors, I had to promise them to pay back the money that the company didn't pay them.
Oh,
It wasn't even my debt, but
yeah.
in
This
order to
is
get them to sign on with me, I had to promise them to pay me back. And they all gladly accepted that commitment, but only one of them, the smallest of the bunch, made me keep my word. The rest of them let the debt go. And so I had started this new business, Gap Wireless, and the which is which is basically a takeoff on my initials, right? And there's a good story there too, because the year I started Gap Wireless was the same year that the Gap clothing company came out with the Gap wireless bra. And
Oh,
seriously, yeah, yeah. And so, anyways, I I started Gap Wireless, and I'd sort of, I had realized that the some of the elements of the customer service and some of the things we were doing in the old company was not exactly, it morphed into a business. I didn't really like the way we handled some of the customer service stuff, and I wanted a business that was truly a pleasure to do business with, and so I built one from the ground up. And everything was about answering the phone, no voicemail, none, et cetera, always being there and being fast, being fair, you know, uh, and having customers want to deal with us. And that became the core values of the business over time. And myself and my partner, when we sold it 15 years later, we did an all cash deal at that time. Yeah. Yeah. I learned my lesson on that one. Yeah. And
oh my gosh.
yeah. So, and the one of my two partners in the original business was my brother, right? And then this other fellow. And my brother used to say, he said, like, you're so blessed with such a shitty memory, right? And because like I just basically got up and like within a like when the kind of dust settled and it was over and I didn't have a job, like a week later, I had a new company going. And a lot of people floundered for quite some time before they found footing in doing something new. But I just started over right away. And I never looked back on it, and like I never looked back on it like, oh, them sons of bitches, and yeah, I gave away my business. Of course, that is what I did actually, but I never had time. I had too much on my mind to not be poor and get back, what I'd lost to worry about, I basically was focusing on what I had ahead of me versus what I'd lost behind me, right? And and some other people had a little bit more negative view on the whole thing, but at this point, I was a small cog in a very large wheel, and I took the largest hit too. So yeah,
Man,
so
what a story. I love, but so there's lesson to be learned there, guys. So you just heard Glenn talk about it. When life kicks you in the teeth, and let's just call it what it is. Life kicked Glenn in the teeth right there. I mean, he's got a bit super successful business. Things are going well. He sells it off. He takes the stock. These guys have been basically acquiring a bunch of shit that drags him under, and he's stuck. And I don't know if you guys know or not, but whenever there's stock that trades hands in a purchase, it's essentially an embargo that says whoever the new
yeah,
stockholder is can't dump the stock because it could cause a panic and tank the stock. So
yeah,
you're stuck. You're hoping that they're legit, and these guys were not. And so instead of
exactly.
crying in his beer, instead of whining about it, instead of feeling sorry for himself, he says, "Fuck it. I got to get back in the game. I gotta make this right. I gotta go back." Not only does he do that, he goes back to people he did business with and says, "Hey, I'm really sorry this happened to you. You got to trust me. It wasn't me. I want another chance." And he talks his way back in with a bunch of these vendors. Like that
Yeah,
takes some big fucking balls. Let's just call it what it
yeah,
is. A lot of
yeah,
people don't have the balls to do what Glenn did, and there's a lesson to be learned there. Take your shots, take action. Feeling sorry for yourself gets you nowhere. All it's going to do is
yeah,
allow you to sink deeper and deeper, and it's going to be a steeper hill to climb once you wake up and decide that it's time to get back in the game. So, love that you shared.
yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Glenn, and
And
kudos
that,
to you
yeah,
for having your
yeah.
head on right.
That first year in starting the business was, well, 2000. It was the end of 2007. So in 2008, that first year we did about 1 million, and then in 2022 when we sold it, we were at 84 million in sales. So the business ended up panning out quite well. And to the day we sold it, we remained, what I consider to be one of the most pleasurable companies to do business with in that sector. And I always tell, like, I had lots of competitors that were formidable competitors, some that were bigger than us, some that were a bit smaller than us, but a lot of them were not a pleasure to do business with, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, they still had a business and they still made money and, whatever. The owner probably had a boat or whatever, but he was an asshole. right? And I just never wanted to be that guy, right? And so yeah, and yeah, so and then 15 years later, I sold the business. I worked out my 3-year deal with the private equity guys, and I left in December. And because of the no compete or whatever, I couldn't compete. So I actually not only switched and my business was in Canada, so I couldn't compete in Canada. So I moved to Florida and I bought a small business in Florida in a different market, but doing the same thing. So selling
Mm.
network equipment and things like that, but in the power generation side, it's completely different business. But the whole business runs the exact same.
Well,
We have
you're
vendors from around the world and yeah.
yeah, and you're using AI now as well, right? Do you use AI in the
Yeah.
business or are you experimenting with
So,
AI
so
outside the
that,
business?
yeah, so I'm using all sorts of AI elements in the business, but also I have a secondary partnership with a Canadian firm that I'm representing them in the U.S. market and helping open up. And so I'm kind of moonlighting on two things. And so I've got my day job running a small business similar to the business I sold and trying to grow it up while I'm dipping my toe in the AI because I'm so enamored with that market and I have an affinity for AI and I just really, I'm really taken with it. So I want to try to participate in it. And so I've been working with this Canadian company trying to sell their solutions into the US market and basically working with companies similar to the ones I sell to and helping them automate their process of responding to RFPs and analyzing drawings and basically simplifying the process of bidding on government projects and large company projects. So RFPs are a nightmare to deal with, and it's a repetitive 100-page document you do over and over again, trying to win business, right? And so we're trying to apply AI in that space, and it's going okay too, right? So
That's super interesting. Yeah. And you're right. I've done hundreds of RFPs throughout my career in various fields, and they're just a gigantic pain in the ass.
pain,
Um,
exactly. Yeah,
it's a great idea to try to use AI to essentially. So I'm assuming what you would do, and I'm
so
not asking you to give away
yeah,
proprietary
no,
secrets here or anything, but you've got the RFP, you've got all the scope documents, and then you've got the responses that are required. Do you essentially match
right,
those up in AI and say, hey, summarize this through this
yes,
filter and basically
yeah,
put together your
yeah.
proposed proposal?
Yeah. Yes, that's sort of the long and the short of it. But when you think about it, think about more like, you have a business that's been doing that for 20 years, and inside of your business is your server that's all secure with private data that, you don't the outside world doesn't see, but this AI model does see it. It's captured inside your system and
Hmm.
in your Azure server, or your Amazon Web Services server, or your Dropbox or whatever, and it looks at 20 years of everything you've ever done and it says build me an executive summary related to this or that and so oftentimes you're ripping apart documents from past jobs over and over and over again, whereas this thing can actually build up this knowledge base and really save you massive amounts of time. Where it can automate is the custom, like if you're bidding on a custom job, the job part is custom, and so the you have to, some technical aspects you have to comment on, right? So,
Yep. Yeah, I know. So just through, 30 plus years of experience, no different than you develop a network and meet people across different fields and whatnot. And I know a lot of investors, professional investors. That's what they do for a living is they take piles of money and try to make money off the money. And they're using AI to do a lot of their business analysis. And they're
yeah,
telling me that, they used to have to, whatever, go either sub it out and you pay, a contractor who does business and out like, the company that bought
right,
your business. Somebody did that on their
right,
side, right?
exactly, yeah,
And that'll take 2 weeks. And now you feed it into AI and you've got a
a
similar
few
product
exactly,
in 10
yeah,
minutes. It's wild what
and
they're able to do with it.
yeah. And the other area where it's really helping as well is that when you think of it, a lot of times when you get an RFP, you might have got it from some kind of a bid site or something, right? Where it's a government bid site, or maybe it's a industry site where RFPs are listed and what have you. And oftentimes, one of your employees, they kind of have this job where every morning they over coffee they go over the bid site and they kind of look for, and what they do is they run these kind of like models of a few keywords that they've developed, right? Whatever their key, pet keywords are for RFPs, and to try to find things, right? But the AI model can go way deeper into these bid sites now and look for things that are similar to the professional things that you do, but maybe in a completely unrelated industry, and present you with other ifs, if then else's, and of opportunities for bids where you might not otherwise have bid on them before in the past too. So it helps you to find and source bid opportunities, and then respond automatically to 70 to 85% of the boilerplate, and allow you to just put the pricing and then maybe custom technical specs or whatever together for the final piece. And and it becomes repeatable, and quite a time saver. So
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, you've got kind of the business bug, don't you? Like most people would
yeah,
have rode off into the sunset after the second successful sale,
yeah,
and you've
right,
already done your 3-year earn out and all that jazz.
right,
But
yeah,
where do you see you going? Where do you see yourself going with not the AI part, not the AI separate
right.
business, but the new business? Where do you see yourself going with that one?
Yeah, so the first two times I did it, the first time I did it with three people, right? And the second time I did it with two people, right? And now this time I'm doing it with one person, right? So it's
Hmm.
kind of like a what can I do? But also it's a much, much smaller business. It's like when I bought it was about a $3 million company. And that was, I bought it sort of in the middle of my earnout period, but I couldn't work there. I had to wait till I was done, and I started in January. And the business is it's growing over last year. And I want to see, if I can take a 3 point something million dollar business and turn it into a $12 million business. And the reason why is kind of a funny story, is that I have this like saying that, no disrespect intended to anyone, but it's any idiot can build a $12 million company in the United States of America. Okay. And they're like, why the hell would you say such a thing? Right. And I like, because I've been working with them my whole life. And I said, and I made it up a long time ago, and it was $8 million. It was like any idiot can run an $8 million company. And what I mean by that is, like, we used to work with these tech companies, and they were all $8 million. And guess who decided what kind of toilet paper they used in that business? In these 8 million, was the owner,
The
right?
owner, yeah, right.
Yeah. And so basically, the problem was these guys are able to rapidly get to this $8 million number. They're like, I run an $8 million company, and I decide whether it's one ply or three, and it's not until they give up the decision making on the toilet paper and the snacks in the kitchen that the business can really grow into a much, much bigger. So I'm thinking, well, if they can all do it, and now with inflation, it's 12 million, not 8 million, right? So now I have to put my money where my mouth is. I have to grow this company to see if I can do it, or if I'm a real idiot, right?
Uh,
But also I'm trying to want to do it by myself. And I had to always negotiate with the color I wanted on the website, and the font I wanted on the letterhead, and these are minor things in the grand, but to me, I'm all very passionate about all the different little pieces that go together for a company. I just don't want to be the sales manager or the finance manager, I like being the general manager and having my hand sort of in everything. And so I came in, I changed the accounting system, I've changed the website, I did change the font, I did change the logo, I did change the color palette, I changed everything basically. And as I was reflecting to someone recently, I'm realizing that the business is growing incrementally, and the most important thing is showing up every day and measure and looking at the second hand on your watch, not the minute hand and not the hour hand, right? Like,
mm,
the business doesn't evolve by the minute, it doesn't evolve by the hour, it evolves by the second. And just you show up every day and you do a little bit, and you do the next right thing and the next right thing and the next right thing. And as long, and just try to be constantly helping the business to evolve. And if it's not something you can do, try to attract a person that can do that job. Like, accounting's not my best so I have a good bookkeeper, good accounting guy, that, makes me make sure everything's on the running on an even keel. But marketing, sales, and the general operation and the back end, the ERP and stuff like that, I find that all very comes by me naturally. Um, and so I just enjoying just doing it. But I think if I can able to sell it in a few years, I mean, I probably would try to retire at that point and, maybe help some other companies in some way, but not have to maybe work 9 to 5 kind of thing, right? So
Yeah, sure. Well, and like you're talking about, so having your fingers in a lot of pies, but even from an opportunity cost perspective, like you talked about, accounting not being like right in your sweet spot, then maybe, not maybe, but then it's better to outsource that and find someone that's
yeah,
good at accounting that can do it, right? Let them do it. And then you can
right,
spend your time and effort on the stuff where you, even though you're the owner, you get to spend your time on the thing that's going to deliver the most value to the company with your
right.
particular set of skills, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, and one of the things I've been sort of, it's kind of a blessing, is this sort of ability to sort of take blind risk. And like a lot of people are like, oh no, we should wait and do that, and I'm like, fuck it, let's just do it now, like let's just do it, right? And because when I approached the first business about opening up the first cell phone company related thing back in 1991, right, they said no, right? That was like a Thursday, and on Friday I quit, right? And the Saturday before that, I had gotten married, and I forgot to tell my wife on Thursday night that I was quitting on Friday. And I just blindly just said, you know what, fuck it. And I quit the next day, and I said, I'm doing this. I went home. I said, I quit my job. And she's like, what? We just got married. And I said, don't worry, we'll be fine. We'll be fine. Now, I do counsel people quite differently now when they ask me how to start a business. I have a very definitive recipe, which I'm happy to share. But I mean, you do need the ability to make decisions and take that step forward, right? So,
Yeah, like you
and
can't be afraid. Like you're cooked. If you're
exactly.
afraid, you're
Yeah.
fucked. Like if you
Yeah.
stand in the middle of
Yeah.
the road, you're gonna get run over. That's just how it works.
Yeah. Right. Well, yeah, and I mean, and like it's funny that you say afraid, right? Because a lot of people that I talk to, right, it's like it's like, oh, I'm just worried about, like, will I have enough money, or this and that or whatever, right? And people are like, well, what did it take, or what does it take to be successful, right? And so for me, there's like, sort of three things that are required, right? One is like a minimum viable product, right? Like what are you going to sell? But that's not the most important thing. Most of the problematic ones that I run into are people that have invented the next best mousetrap, right? Oh, I got this great mousetrap. I can get it for like really cheap. And it's really awesome. I go, have you sold any? Right. And they're like, no, but I mean, it's amazing. Right. And I'm like, okay, great. But before you do anything, make sure somebody wants to buy it, right? But you need something to sell. It could be a service, could be a product, could be software, could be SaaS, whatever. It could be something, but it has to be something, and it has to be minimally viable, right? And then the, you know, and you need 18 to 24 months of your monthly expenses in the bank, or you need a spouse that can fund you for that amount of time,
Mm.
where you're zero burden on the business. You don't need to take one penny out of the company for the first 18 months, because if you do, you're probably inhibiting the business in some way. And the business will not, like 99 times out of 100, it's just not going to throw off monthly income that you need to pay your rent or mortgage or food and all that. You need to have that either in the bank. And obviously you're going to be living on, maybe the ramen budget that those months or whatever, but nonetheless, it needs to be in the bank, right? So your mortgage is paid, your ramen noodles are paid, whatever, et cetera, et cetera. That's the second thing. And then the third thing that you need, which I find to be, they're all important. I guess they're all equally important, but the most important one is that first customer that you don't deserve, right? Because every good business starts with an order you didn't deserve. You only have to earn the rest of them, right? Because the reality is that if you're starting from zero and you get a customer, well, the customer can't, you don't have any track record. So it's basically they're taking a chance on you and you've done nothing to deserve it, right?
Mm.
So it always starts with an order you don't deserve. So go get that order. That's the key thing, right? Minimum viable product, 18 months runway, and a customer you don't deserve. But you got to service the shit out of that customer once you get them, and you got to go earn everyone after that, right? Because now you do have a reputation because the first customer becomes your first testimonial, right? And so that's the first part of it. And then the second element to the starting of the business is the whole fear thing, right? And I always explain to people about the fear is like, think of it like a wall, right? And, you keep butting up against this wall and you're scared, right? It's like, oh, well, what if I don't have enough money? And what if my product's not good enough? What if I don't have any customers? What if I don't have any of this and that and whatever? And you keep smashing into the wall and bouncing off of it. And guess what? You're not getting anywhere, right? But what I have to tell people to do is like just take a leap of faith and jump over the wall, right? Because the what happens magically is the fear gets replaced with more fear, actually, with a worse fear that's 10 times worse than the fear you had on the other side of the wall. Except the fear pushes you away from the wall now because it's like, fuck, I don't want to go bankrupt. I need to feed my family. I can't live on ramen noodles forever. And you'll do anything possible to keep the business going. But you can't do that on the other side of the wall, right? Because you're not in business. You're still working 9 to 5 for somebody else, right? So take that leap of faith. And then and you'll find that every day you look behind you, the wall's there, but after 6 months, you can't see the wall. It's gone. It's way in the past. The fear's still there, man. Like, don't think you're ever not going to be scared shitless because you will be.
Right.
Yeah. Fear is your friend, right? Like the two biggest motivators, really, people don't like to hear this, but are fear and greed, right? And so, and they're both, it's a wash up in terms of which one is a bigger motivator, but I mean, like people are like, oh, why did you start another business? I've said I was scared of being poor, like, whatever. And I'd also seen the power of leverage of owning the company. I'm not going to go work for somebody else, right?
Right.
Like, no.
It, on your so interesting. For about 15 years I worked at the largest grocery wholesaler in the country and owned by one guy. And he bought the business from his dad and grew it from like a $200
Wow.
million business, which sounds like a lot, but it's peanuts in the food business. It's nothing
Right.
in the food business, but he grew it to a $30 billion business. So he was a
Jeez.
multi-billionaire. And he closed the warehouse that existed. He built a new one on spec in a different state. And then he went out and found his first customer. And he would literally, so he went to all his employees and said, hey, I can't make payroll at the level we're at. I'm asking you to take a temporary pay cut until I sign up a customer and get some revenue coming in. Will you do it? And almost everybody agreed to it. And then he rewarded him down the road, but they took a
Yeah.
huge leap of faith, trusted him. And he would literally go pick up their payment on Fridays so he could make payroll on Mondays.
Wow.
Like if he ever showed up and the
Yeah.
office was closed or he couldn't get the check, he wasn't going to make payroll on Mondays. So he operates this way for a while. He's looking for the order you don't deserve. That's what he was looking for. And
Yeah.
there's this giant supermarket chain on the East Coast called Ahold, and they own Stop and Shop and a couple of other brands like that. And he's calling on them, trying to get business, calling on them, trying to get business. And he finally comes back to the office one day and says, I got the Stop and Shop frozen bakery business. And everybody looks around and they're like, hey, Rick, we don't have any freezers. He's like, you didn't hear what I just said. I got the
Yeah.
Stop and Shop frozen bakery business.
Right.
Like, Rick, we don't have
Yeah.
frozen trucks. He's like, I don't think you fucking heard what I said.
Exactly.
I got the business. Now we're going to figure out how to service it because this is our foot in the door to build the business. And it's exactly what you just talked about. Like he went out
Yeah.
and found the sale that needed to happen to grow the business and then put the plan together to service it.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such good stuff. Such good stuff.
Yeah.
So you wrote a book, largely, well, I shouldn't say largely, it's about sales, called Never Sit in the Lobby, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's 57 tips. And so basically it's sort of how to act and stay in front of your customers and to be a pleasure to do business with always, right? And what I mean by that is don't be a pain in the ass, right? And because nobody likes a salesman that's a pain in the ass, right? And so it's just very simple rules that are broken down into snippets that you can read. You can flip open the book at any point and read a rule, and they're all like, wow, like, why is he telling me where to sit at lunch, right? And I'm like, because I learned over 40 years the best place to sit in a restaurant at the table, that's like, in the middle of the book I do talk about that, but and many other things. But I mean, be the first guy there, right? And and you want to be sitting with your back to the wall, right? Just, mafia style, right? And you want to be dead center so that you can play court to the whole table. And
Exactly.
if you arrive late, that one chair, guess where it's going to be? Beside the idiot at the end that you're going to be stuck talking to, and all the action's going to be down at the other end. You want to be in the middle, right? And I'm like, that's a rule. Like, that's one of my rules, right? And but basically, a lot of tips on how I was able to, uh, not automate, but sort of like, stay in front of the customers on a repetitive basis, not have to constantly try to be making appointments, right? And I always tell people, like, when you're at a customer, don't leave without knowing the next time you're going to see that same customer, right? And have the next meeting set, whatever the purpose of it might be. And yeah, so these are rules that I learned from the mentors in the first business and other places along the way, and I started writing them down, and some of them have funny stories to them and things like that, and I named them after some of the people, and then during the pandemic I finally said, you know what, I'm going to finally write, compile it into a you know like a cogent set of rules, and publish it. And the Never Sit in the Lobby is the title that the one of the editors came up with, because she didn't like my title. She said my title sucked and it wouldn't do. And Never Sit in the Lobby is one of the key rules, right? Never sit in the lobby. And yeah. And the other funny story I like to tell is that I wrote it during the pandemic on the weekends, right? And I basically decided I was going to write 2,000 words every weekend until the book was done. And I Googled how many words I needed, and it said 75,000, right? And so I wrote the 75,000 words, and then I hired this editor, one of the few editors I needed, but I sent it to her, and she said, "You can't say fuck that many times in a book, Glenn." And I said, "Oh," I said, "Okay, let's agree on 71,000 words and we can move on." And so the book became 71,000 words instead of 75,000 words, right? And
Oh, I love it.
she changed the title, and I got a couple of dams and a couple of shits and a couple of FUs and whatever, and that was it, right? And so the anyways, she's like, you can't talk that way, right? I'm like, that's actually the way I talk to my people, right?
Totally.
And that's how I get my point across, right? I'm not doing it just to be like vulgar or something, and but anyways, the yeah, so
Yeah, look,
I'm
I
happy
tell
to answer
people
any
all the time.
questions, or yeah.
Yeah, I got tons of questions, but I tell people all the time, you give me a word that has the same connotation, expresses the same emotion, or
Right.
provides the same gravitas as fuck, and I'll start using it.
Mhm.
Until then, it's fuck.
Exactly.
If you don't
Exactly.
like it, fuck you. Fine with me. If you don't like it, duly noted.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I love your sit at the I have a similar approach to meetings, especially meetings that I think are going to be contentious. So let's just say you've got a negotiation going on and things have hit loggerheads and everybody's tense, and you wind up setting up a time you're all going to be in a room together. What usually happens is one side sits on one side of the table, one side sits on the other side of the table. What I'll do in those situations is intentionally walk over and sit on the other side of the table directly in
Right.
the middle of all the people on the other side. And it does two
Right.
things. One, it shows a tremendous amount of confidence, like, who's this fucking guy? And it
Right.
also lets all the air out of the room because it makes
Yeah.
it more collegial and more collaborative, because
Yeah.
the setup of that table in between the two of you, like looking at each other going at it, it all dissipates depending on where you sit. So people don't think
Right.
about little things, but little things like that make a big difference.
Yeah. Another one that in keeping with that exact rule that you've got is, and I challenge your listeners to give this a try, which is because they don't always have a meeting. But what I'm going to suggest they can do tomorrow, right? Which is I took the chairs from in front of my desk, right? And I only have one chair now, and I have it beside my chair. And
Mm,
so when someone comes in to talk to me, then they have to walk onto my side of my desk and they have to sit beside me with nothing in between us, and they can see my monitors and they can see everything. Obviously I don't have like the financial statement up when they're
sure.
sitting there or their letter telling them they're fired. No, I'm just kidding. But you know, the I'm just kidding. But you would not believe how game changing it is, right? To not have that desk between you and the person. And like some, like dude from the warehouse has a question for you or whatever, and he comes in, I'm like, have a seat, right? And he's like sitting beside the owner of the company, the president of the company, whatever. And it just, I just realized a long time ago how much of a difference it makes. And it's hard to sort of quantify it or put it into words, but if you try it, you'll see what I mean. And it breaks down a lot of barriers and walls and creates this bond, right? Because they go in every other office of anyone in that same company or other companies or whatever, and they're all faced with that barrier, right? And so it becomes a different differential point, right? And so it's something they can try, just like sitting on the other side with the customer, like you said, right? It's really, really powerful.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. One of the things I always tell people is if you're going to and I'm an excellent salesman. If you ever, I always point to pictures of my wife if you want to know if I'm a good salesman or not, because she's
Yeah,
a really,
right.
she's
Yeah,
a really good looking lady. She's an even better
that's
person
funny.
than she is good
Right.
looking. And we're going to
Yeah.
celebrate our
You must
32nd
have done some
anniversary next
sales. Good
month,
for
you
you.
know?
Oh, that's
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
And,
Yeah.
you got to learn how to sell without selling because nobody likes
Yeah.
the used car salesman approach. Is it effective
Right.
sometimes? Yes, but it makes your entire relationship transactional, and that's not where you want to be.
Yeah.
You've got to develop what I call sticky relationships. They have to look at you as a business partner, not a vendor. And
Yeah.
if you can get to that point, then you're in. And uh, I work in and have worked in businesses where it's very cutthroat, and people will, for 5 cents, a unit, they'll sell you down
Yeah.
the river. And so
Right.
you can't rely on price, because the problem with relying on price is even if you win the race to the bottom on price, you lose because now you're at the bottom. You have no pricing
Yeah.
power. There's no margin down there. You
Yeah.
can't make any money.
Right.
You're
Yeah.
fucked. So
Yeah.
you've got to create these other things that provide value. And the best way I heard it explained was um, if you're selling lettuce, don't try to sell your customer lettuce. Help them sell more salad, and
Yeah.
they'll buy more lettuce from you.
Yes.
So I'd
Yeah.
love to hear your take. I'd love to hear your take on like just
So
that
there's a
relationship part.
whole, right. So just everything you're saying there, there's like a litany of the 57 rules are go over that, all that stuff, right? So the first things first. So the first thing is about, you said, being excited about the product and whatever. So the one of the rules I have is like, if you're not like if you're first of all, if you're not selling the number one or number two brand of whatever you're selling, I counsel everyone to quit their job immediately and go get a better job. Because the reality is that it's always the Pareto principle, right? Like 80% of the people buy this, and no one got fired for buying IBM or whatever the brand is of the example, but it's always the same, but the and number two, sort of, so 80% kind of goes to IBM, and the 20% gets the number two brand, and everyone else is fighting over the rest of the 20% of 90, the last 4% is what it works out to, right? And so
Sure.
doesn't matter how good you are, just because of virtue of the fact that you got the shitty brand or whatever, you're not going to be able to sell as much, and so you're limiting your income. So sell the best product that you can possibly sell within the scope of what you're selling. You know what I mean? And like for instance, you could sell, Honda, Toyota, or a Nissan. That's fine. Any one of them is probably fine within that realm because they're kind of like ranked or whatever, or BMW, Mercedes, or Audi, or and there's kind of like in that stack, right? I'm not trying to compare Hyundai to Mercedes, but
Yeah.
the always be selling the best brand that you can get so that your time's not wasted. That's first thing. So the second thing was, was the discounting and whatever. There's a lot on that in the book, but also I have a rule, like I'd rather be last than second. Okay. And so because second is the first loser, right? And so guess what you get? You get the steak knives, and that's basically it, right? If you've ever seen Glengarry Glen Ross, right? And
Yep.
the first guy gets the Cadillac, right? And you get the steak knives. Third guy's fired, right? And so the what I mean by I'd rather be last than second means the moment that I realized in any kind of a sales where I unequivocally know that for some reason beyond my control, I'm not going to win, I immediately politely recuse myself from the sales process and I race to the next customer who's a better fit for what I'm doing because my all my competitors are fighting to become second, the first loser, right? Against the brand. I already know that so and so's getting the deal because of past contract, design spec, whatever, right? And I'm not saying
Yep.
give up early. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying at the exact second, it could be 99% of the way along or 2% in, you realize you're not getting the deal, right? A lot of guys would come back to me and say, "Oh, we should like fly them to the factory and give them a factory tour and bring in the engineers from England." And I'm like, "No, no, you know, it's over. We're and so that's is value your time, and when you're losing, go find a new customer that's a better fit, right? And because people can't be in two places at one time, right? And the the when it comes to discounting, one of my rules is that freedom begins with no, right? And so so often I find guys where they jump through the hoops, they meet every hoop the customer wanted, they gave them a trial unit, they did this, they did that, and then they got beat up on the price or whatever, and then they went in to collect the order, and the guy's like, "Oh, I'm going to need another 3%." And the guy's like, "Oh, okay, well, let me go ask my boss," right? Or something like that, which is basically saying, "Yes, I'll go and try," right? Whereas the freedom becomes when you say no, everything stops at that point. The work for you stops. Your work starts when you say yes to something, right? And
Yep.
so, you got to get in your car, you got to drive back to the office an hour, knowing your boss is going to give you shit because you didn't get the deal. Now, and then you got to phone, "Oh, I talked to my boss and he said, we kind of did the best that, whatever." And not a good look, right? Not a pleasure to do business with, right? So those are rule breakers for me. So I'm like, we already negotiated, we've already come in with our best price. And as a matter of fact, this stuff's on 8-week delivery. You said you needed it by July 19th, right? I mean, production cycles begin every X days. If I don't get the order today or tomorrow-ish, we won't make the 8-week window. You're going to be into the next cycle. I can't deliver till September.
Yep.
And so the other thing is, just a couple other, like, in terms of them trying to abuse you and whatever, it's like, "Oh, I need a trial unit." I'm like, "Okay." And I'm very particular about like demos and stuff because they tend to get misused, and they're used as crutches or whatever. So people say, "Oh, I need a demo." I'm like, "Oh, how long do you need it for?" And they're like, "Oh, at least 2 weeks." I go, "2 weeks?" And I said, "No, no, I said I could maybe get it to you for like 3 days." I said, "But this thing's way too busy for whatever they say." I divide everything by at least half. I need it for a week. No, I can do
Totally.
2 days. 2 weeks, like, oh, maybe I can do a week. And they're like, "Okay, fine, a week." I said, and then they're saying, "Okay, great, just ship it into me." I go, "No, number one rule, never fax the facts, never ship the shit." And they're like, "What do you mean by that?" And I'm like, "We're not allowed to ship the demos. I have to deliver it. I have to set it up, plug it in, and show your guys how to use it."
If you
If
don't,
you,
it's
I
going to sit on someone's desk for
exactly,
6 days, and then they're going to
and
put it
then
through some rush on the last day and send it back to you and go, "Well,
thank
this
you,
thing sucks."
exactly.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so what I'm doing is while I'm there plugging it in and doing the demo and whatever, I'm working with all those people to make sure I can come back once or twice in the process, right? And some of the other things that I teach is that I say, look at whatever it is you sell, box software, it doesn't matter, right? But I always sold like hardware, but typically things that plug in the wall or go part of a network or whatever. And it was expensive, and I'd say, "Okay, this thing costs 100 grand," and I'd say, "In this company, 100 grand needs to get signed off by boom, this guy." the
Yep.
CEO, maybe it's the CFO, maybe it's the director of finance, maybe it's the procurement manager, whatever. You just have to figure it out and guess where 100K, like IBM, a lot of people can sign off on 100K at IBM, right? But I mean, at Acme Gizmos or whatever, it might be the owner, right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
so whatever would happen was the moment there was something for a discombobulator that I wanted to sell for 100 grand, I'd call the CEO and I'd say, "Hey, Jack, it's Glenn, from Gap or whatever. Your guys are looking at the discombobulators. I just want to see if I could get a few minutes of your time to, talk about the deal and whatever." And he's like, "I don't get involved with these discombobulators. What are you talking about, right? Like, my VP of engineering handles all that." So I'm like, "Oh, okay. I haven't met him. Who's that again? Oh, that's Paul, right? Okay. Paul, just got off the phone with the CEO. Told me I got to get a hold of you to talk to you about these discombobulators." He's like, "No, no, I don't get involved with that. Like, no, no, no. My director of engineering, he does it, right? That's not VP level stuff, right?"
Mm.
And that's Bill, right? So I call Bill and I'm like, "Bill, I've been on the phone all day with the CEO, the VP of engineering. They said I need to get some time on your schedule to talk about the discombobulators and see if we can get a trial going and whatever." He's like, "Oh, well, you know, I don't actually do that. The shop foreman takes care of evaluating the units, right?" And so you see where this is going, right? So now I call
Yep.
Jack, the foreman, right? And I said, "Look, I was just talking to Bill. He was on the phone with the VP and the CEO, and we got to get these discombobulators down there pronto." And the whole point is that you keep getting punted down the line, right? And eventually you end up with the technician who's going to do the demo, and never fax the fax, never ship the shit, right? I deliver it, I set it up or whatever, right? And guess what? As I'm setting it up, I'm like, I call the CEO and I say, "Hey, Bob or whatever his name is." I said, "Look, I know you don't get involved in discombobulators, but this thing is discombobulating the fuck out of your production line right now. And I know you're going to sign off on the 100 grand. You need to come down here for 2 minutes and see what this thing's doing." And
Yeah.
guess who usually shows up 9 times out of 10? The CEO comes waltzing in to have a look at your discombobulator. And now you can call any one of those people at any point in the cycle, right? And get approval because they've already been pre-qualified. It's not like the shop technician told you it gets decided by so and so, and you never even realized later that it was the CEO that had to sign off. You're like buffered through 4 or 5 guys. You can never climb up, but you can always go to the top and come back down again, right? So at any point, I
Hmm.
call the VP, I could call the CEO, I could call the director of engineering, I could call the shop foreman, I could call the technician, whatever guy I needed to, and make sure that he was taken care of. Because, there have at times these guys have told me, "Look, Glenn, I don't care how good your discombobulators are. We have a contract for discombobulators with, Xerox or whatever, right? Some other company, and you're never getting the deal." So I'm like, "Guess what? I got to go because I'm selling discombobulators to your competitor." And I race down the road and I go and sell the discombobulator to someone else while people are wasting time doing factory tours and demos of products to people that are never going to buy, right? And
Exactly. There's no reason to rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic. You know what the outcome
yeah,
is going to be. Cut your
right.
losses. Yeah,
Mhm.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. Have you gotten feedback from people who've read the book? What kind of feedback have you gotten or reviews have you gotten from folks?
5 stars.
Yeah, right.
No, no, it's been good, and there's been quite a few reviews, and it's hard selling books, right? Like, I mean, it's kind of a little bit of a vanity thing, honestly. I wanted to get it done, and I felt really proud and happy when I got it done, and it helps to. It's amazing how much writing a book can really help you in advancing your voice for being heard later, right? And it just gives you a little bit of social proof and stuff like that. But I've been pretty happy with the results, and been able to spread the message and work with other entrepreneurs on, when I talk about coaching and stuff, I don't like have a coaching business, but I'll work with entrepreneurs and trade knowledge for knowledge. You know what I mean? Like, they'll ask me, "Hey, like, how do you compensate your sales force, or how do you do this and that?" And but I realize they're in a different kind of business. Maybe they're in something more financial related or something, and I basically extract some value through the relationship, and I share whatever I can with them, and it becomes a symbiotic relationship where I I freely share my knowledge with others, and when they and then I feel comfortable calling them if I need their help at some point in the future, right? And they usually freely give it. So yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you've got tons and tons of experience. You're a great storyteller. You got to do some speaking, don't you?
Yeah, I do some. Again, because I'm always working kind of 9 to 5, it's kind of that's kind of like a whole grind in itself, right? Is getting and these things you got to fly somewhere, day there, day back for an hour thing, and so I thought that maybe I would get there after I sold the company, but then I got as crazy busy with the private equity, proving that they didn't get ripped off. And,
Mm.
and then, so I think that that's kind of be my next sort of thing. When I clock out from this new thing in a few years, then that would be a great chance, something I would love to do.
Yeah, you should. You should consider it.
Yeah.
Like I say, you got great stories to tell. You are a great storyteller, and that's such an effective way to communicate. A lot of people don't have that, and
Right.
yeah, for what it's worth, uh, I,
Oh,
I
thanks.
I highly
Yeah.
recommend it. You should pursue it when you
Yeah.
are done screwing
Yeah.
around with businesses.
Yeah. Exactly.
So.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things we do here is just open the floor to the guests. So I ask a lot of questions, I learn about backgrounds, and we try to cover a lot of areas. But is there anything I haven't asked you about, or anything that you feel strongly about that you want to share with our audience while we're together?
Um, not so much. I mean, I got a lot of the highlight ones I love to point out. There's like 57 tips, so I mean, I've got a lot more to share, but the and then some, right? They didn't all make the book, right? Some of them were NSFW, right? Not safe for work. And they're like, you definitely cannot put that chapter in the book, like, that kind of thing. And but one thing I always share at the end, especially for the younger folk, you know, is the rule that I learned. I don't even know how I learned it, but learning it was really valuable. And so, and I'll kind of tell it the straightforward, and then I'll just tell you my sort of funny way I try to present it at the end. So the rule is you only get forever to make another impression, right? And so what I mean by that is that oftentimes, you're working in an office, you're in an environment or whatever, and people that can control your destiny are constantly walking by you. And every time they walk by you, whatever you're doing is making an impression, which is as valuable as the first impression that you made. So if you're on Facebook and the CEO walks by, not a good look, right? And the reality is like those things stick, whereas when you're at trade shows and or you're in an environment where people that can govern the path of your career are in your purview or whatever, like in and you can make an impression, make a good one, right? And so especially if you ever do trade shows, that's a golden opportunity to advance your standing for permanently with higher ups. And what I mean by that is most people screw up trade shows massively. They're either
Hmm.
sitting down, whining that their feet are sore, sneaking away from the booth. They don't help set up and they don't help tear down, right?
Right.
So you want to show up early, help the team set up, always help them tear down, never leave early, right? And then when you're in the booth, be in the booth. If you have a break, take your break. That's fine. But when you're not in the break, don't fucking sneak away and don't be sitting down, right? And when you run out of customers, walk in the aisle and pull them in, especially when the owner's there and can see you doing it. And then when you run out of that, there's probably directors and product managers and VPs from divisions at the booth, because it's the booth, talk to each one of them and say, hey, what are the top 5 reasons why your shit in this booth is the best, out of all the other crap in our booth today, right? And get the big guys to explain to you. And later they'll be like, oh, that Glenn guy shows he's amazing. He's out in the aisle pulling people in. He arrived early, he stayed late. He's the only one that helped us tear down. I didn't see him whining or complaining once. All the other guys were whining and bitching and moaning, and they remember that later. And so when opportunities come up, they instantly think of you, right? And so the funny way I try to explain that is like when you're the lowly salesman in covering the shitty territory out in Windsor, and you look at where you want to be in that company, which is maybe CRO or the vice president of sales or whatever. All you need to do is figure out who you got to kill between that job and the job you want, right?
Totally.
Right, that's the only thing standing in your way. And so you do that by making yourself look better than them by being always being a good impression, right? And and so and every time there's no second chances, right? At a first impression or any impression, right? So
Yeah, I love the trade show example. So I've done hundreds of trade shows like you have too. And we put our own on one time as a vendor and huge space, 25,000 square foot ballroom and hundreds of booths and all that jazz. And so I show up the first day and I'm new. I'm the number 3 guy at this company. My boss is there. He's the number 2 guy. And the president was not there, like, which was fine. But all the product comes in and I
right,
grab a pallet jack and start pulling the truck. And people
right,
looked at me like I had 3 heads. They're like, what are you doing? I'm
yeah,
like, I'm pulling the truck. What the fuck does it look like I'm doing? And they're like, well,
yeah,
your predecessor kind of walked around with a clipboard and a cup of coffee. And I was like, well, maybe that's why he's my
exactly,
fucking predecessor, isn't it? Um,
exactly, exactly,
now,
yeah,
why don't you grab a pallet jack and help me here instead of fucking standing and watching? Right. And we had that thing knocked out. I stayed for break. Like, that's just how it goes. You got to work. You got to show your
exactly,
value.
yeah,
Another story. I worked at the large grocery wholesaler. I joined and it was an archaic place. It was kind of swimming with the sharks. You had to find your own way. There wasn't great training. You just like either made it or you didn't. And so I had moved my family all the way across the country because I'm from Oregon. This job was on the East Coast. So I literally had 3 kids under the age of 8 and my wife, and we moved across the country where we knew nobody at the time. And so I get there and I feel like I'm really struggling. And we worked in this office and the way the office was set up, this was back when was this? Early 2000s. So it was before all the high-tech water, all this. So we had a water bubbler, the old water bubbler that was there. And I sat in an area where all the assistants sat. So it was me and the guy that ran all of the buying department that I was a part of and the assistants. And I made sure that water bubbler was full. Anytime that bottle went down to 0, I went out because they were heavy as fuck. Remember those big jugs of water? I mean, those things weighed close to 100 pounds. And I could handle it, but nobody else could. And I always thought, you know what? If it comes down to them firing me or another person, at least I might have the advantage of filling the fucking water tank up.
right,
And that maybe that's what keeps me here. You know what I mean? You
yeah.
got to have
You
that,
never
like you
know,
talked
right?
about earlier about quitting your job and you'll do whatever you got to do to feed your family. Like that fear and that intensity that comes with it, there's a lot of value in that. And
Absolutely,
yeah, I love your messages. I love the way you deliver those messages. So
awesome,
really good
yeah,
stuff. Really good stuff. Well, Glenn, thank you so much for joining us.
yeah. My pleasure.
For the audience too, we'll have a link to Glenn's book in the show notes, so you don't have to go far to look for it. If you have any desire to change what you're doing right now, I could not agree with Glenn more. If you want to be compensated at a higher level than you probably deserve based on either your education or your skill level, find a job in sales. And sales is
Exactly,
about tenacity. Sales is about building good systems and following up. Anyone can do it. You just got to be willing to do it. And Glenn's got 40 years of experience condensed down to a book with 57 tips. Buy the book, read the book, find a sales job, and you could change the trajectory of your life. So, highly recommend it.
exactly.
Highly recommend it.
Thanks,
Yep.
Joe. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Hey, we'll keep in touch, Glenn. I'd love to maybe,
Yeah,
down the road, talk to you about how your AI business is going.
I will.
Um,
Yeah, I'd love that.
yeah, see what's
That'd be
going on
great.
there. So, really
Okay.
appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you. And thanks for having me. Much appreciated. Have a great
All
day.
right. All right. Have a
All
great
right.
day. See you
Take
later.
care. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
See you. Bye.
All right, guys. What a great guy, huh? What a great storyteller. I love Glenn's experience. And look, the thing I love most is the story about the first business that he sold and how the company essentially fucked him. And he got these shares in the company that turned out to be worthless. So he'd basically given his company away and was broke and didn't have a job afterwards. And he didn't whine about it. He didn't cry about it. He literally got back to work within a week of that happening and rebuilt another business, which he successfully sold. So tons of valuable life lessons there, tons of lessons in business, tons of lessons on how to take your shots, on how to overcome fear and take action, because it's action that's going to get you where you want to be. So, really appreciative of Glenn coming on and sharing all those stories with us and really educating us on how to take action in the face of difficult circumstances. I thought he did a great job. Loved having him on as a guest. And like you heard at the end there, we'll keep in touch with him. And as he grows that AI business, I'd love to have him back on and talk to him more about what he's learning from that. Because super smart guy, super hardworking guy. And you can do a lot worse than listening to Glenn on career advice. So thanks again to Glenn. Hey, James puts it up over here every day. Don't forget to head over to our website, saltygingertalk.com. All of our podcast episodes are available there. Links to our social media accounts are there. We've got a daily newsletter that we publish every weekday. You can subscribe to there. And as always, please like, share, comment, subscribe to the podcast, whatever platform you consume it on. Super helpful for us. Now, we're going to keep having awesome people like Glenn on. You don't want to miss all the tips and the advice and the stories they've got that will help you build the life that you want. Make sure you catch our next episode, and we will see you there.